Welcome to another deep dive,
Deep dive, yeah.
where we take
A topic.
one topic, one big idea,
A stack of sources.
a big stack of sources, and we kind of go through it all and really distill it down to
The good stuff.
the essentials, the really important things that you should know about this topic.
And today is a big one.
Today is a big one. We're talking about this concept of the parallax view.
It's not just a concept, it's a lens.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to look at all kinds of different stuff.
Okay.
From like quantum physics to society, how it's structured.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, it is, right?
From quantum physics to the structure of like the systems that we live in.
But see, that's the thing about parallax. It's all about these like shifts in perspective.
Yeah.
These surprising connections.
I'm ready, I think.
I think you are. I think our listeners are.
Let's do it.
Okay, so if you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff we're going to talk about today gets pretty complex.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy.
It's pretty heavy.
But the goal today is to kind of make it click.
Yeah.
Like to give you those aha moments where you're like, oh, I see.
Yeah.
So we're going to cut through the density, the complexity, and deliver you some real insights about reality itself.
Ooh.
How we see it, and even like the frameworks, the structures that we live in.
Okay, so to start off, maybe we should give like a basic definition of what is this parallax?
Yeah, so parallax is this kind of like, you're looking at something from two different angles.
Okay.
And there's this difference.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that the thing changes.
Okay.
It's that your perspective changes and you see this like irreducible difference, this gap.
Okay, so can you give us like a real world example of what you mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the sources give us a bunch of these really cool starting points. So you can imagine like in quantum physics, they talk about how something can be like a wave or a particle.
At the same time.
But it's not even at the same time. It's like depending on how you look at it, how you measure it.
Yeah.
It changes what it is. Yeah.
The act of looking at it.
Totally.
So that's a kind of parallax, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then, if you think about our brains,
Oh, yeah.
you can open up a skull, you can see all the stuff in there,
The goo.
right? The goo, the neurons.
The mushy stuff.
But
Where am I?
where's the consciousness?
Right.
There's no like little pilot in there.
No.
Right. So there's this gap between the physical stuff
Okay.
and our experience.
Yeah.
And then on a more abstract level,
Okay.
think about like the meaning we give to things
Okay.
versus like the raw reality of the thing.
Right.
That can be totally different.
Okay, so it sounds like we're saying it's not just like,
Subjective.
yeah, subjective, like I think this and you think that.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's deeper. It's more fundamental than just disagreeing on stuff. It's about
The way we see the world,
frame.
how we make sense of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're going to look at that through like all these different lenses.
Right.
Philosophy,
Science.
even politics.
Ooh. Okay, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Let's jump in.
So first off, this idea of ontological difference,
Okay.
which is a mouthful. I know.
It is.
But it's basically like the ultimate parallax.
Okay.
This gap between us and reality.
Right.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
What do you mean by that?
Like, it's not a problem to be solved.
Okay.
It's what makes it possible for us to even access reality in the first place.
Okay. That is a little bit of a head scratcher. How does that even make sense?
So think about Heidegger.
Oh, yeah.
He's a philosopher, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about how this difference, this gap, means that things just are,
Okay.
they don't need a purpose.
Just existing.
Just existing
Okay.
before we like slap a meaning on them.
Right.
But then you have someone like Sartre,
Okay.
who describes this same raw existence
Yeah.
as this like heavy, meaningless stuff that doesn't care about us at all.
Oh, right.
So it's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. This gap, this ontological difference
Right.
can feel like this amazing freedom,
Yeah.
but also like this terrifying abyss,
Right. Okay.
right? So the source takes that even further,
Oh, boy.
and it says maybe the fact that we can't fully grasp the thing,
Okay.
the capital T thing, like pure reality.
Right.
Maybe that's the key to what it is.
Okay.
So they come up with this idea of the parallax real.
The parallax
Yeah, it's not a substance. It's like the space between
perspectives.
between different ways of seeing.
Ooh, that's trippy.
Yeah, you only see it when you shift your perspective.
Oh, okay. So it's relational.
It is totally.
It's not the thing itself. It's
difference.
the difference between.
How we see it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so now let's talk about Kant.
Kant,
Yeah, Kant,
the philosopher.
the philosopher
That's
Kant.
fine.
Okay, so there's this guy, Karatani.
Karatani.
Yeah, he's a thinker.
Okay.
And he looks at Kant's work and he says, there's this real power in this parallax view,
Okay.
especially when we come up against these things called antinomies.
Antinomies.
That's a fancy word.
It is a fancy word. What does it mean?
It basically means like fundamental disagreements.
Okay.
Where both sides have a point and you can't really resolve them.
Right, like an impasse.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But instead of like trying to pick a winner or find some compromise, the parallax view says, no, look at the tension itself.
The tension.
Yeah, that gap.
Okay.
That's where the real insight is.
So instead of trying to get rid of the disagreement, we lean into the disagreement.
Exactly. We embrace the difference.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So can you give me like a concrete example of one of these antinomies, one of these disagreements?
Yeah, for sure. So the source talks about how Kant himself struggled with this question of how we gain knowledge.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one.
Right, like where does knowledge come from?
Right.
So on one side, you've got the empiricists.
Empiricists.
They say all knowledge comes from the senses.
Right, what we see, what we touch, what we experience.
Exactly.
Right.
And then on the other side, you've got the rationalists.
Okay.
They say no reason is the primary source of knowledge.
Okay, so it comes from our minds.
Yeah, our logic or thinking.
Okay.
So Kant, he didn't just pick a team, right? He didn't try to mush them together. He said, no, this tension between experience and reason, it's fundamental.
Oh.
And that's the point.
So it's not about resolving it, it's about the fact that it exists.
Yeah, that tension, that gap.
Yeah.
That's where the insight is.
Okay, I see. So then what about this idea of the transcendental subject?
Ooh, the transcendental subject.
That Kant talks about. How does that fit into this whole parallax thing?
Right, so the transcendental, in Kant's view, it's like this hidden operating system that makes our experience possible. Right, so it's not something we can see or touch. It's neither the external world nor our like internal thoughts and feelings.
So it's not the world, and it's not our experience of the world.
Yeah, it's like this empty structure that makes it all possible.
That organizes it, that kind of makes it make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So now if we could experience this transcendental I directly, that would be like the ultimate reality.
Okay.
The thing in itself, which Kant says we can never do.
We can never do.
We can never access it directly.
Okay, so why not? Why can't we just see this thing in itself?
Okay, this is where it gets really wild.
Oh boy.
Kant says if we could directly perceive the thing in itself, it would completely screw up our ability to be moral.
Whoa.
Yeah. Like imagine if you had absolute proof of God in heaven.
Like right in front of me.
Right there.
Okay.
You wouldn't act out of a sense of duty.
Right.
You'd just be driven by like fear of punishment or desire for reward.
Oh, I see.
Right? You'd be like a robot, just going through the motions. So it's the struggle.
The struggle.
The fact that we don't have perfect knowledge, that we have to choose, that makes morality possible.
So the limitations of our understanding are actually what make us moral beings.
That's the Kantian twist.
That is a twist. That's a mind blower.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so next up we have Hegel. Hegel's idea of appearance versus reality.
Okay, so Hegel, he thought the real philosophical problem wasn't reality itself.
Okay.
But appearance.
Appearance, like the way things seem.
Oh, isn't that what we're trying to see through?
Well, Hegel says no.
Okay.
He says every reality we encounter is already framed.
Framed.
Like a picture.
Okay.
This frame isn't always visible.
Right.
But it shapes how we see everything.
Okay.
And this creates a fundamental asymmetry.
Asymmetry.
Yeah, between different viewpoints. So there's no neutral, objective reality out there, independent of the frame.
So the frame is part of what makes it real.
It constitutes reality.
Okay, whoa.
So can you give me like a real-world example of this invisible frame?
Oh, yeah. Think about a painting.
Okay.
A modern art painting.
Okay.
So there's the physical frame, right?
The one around the canvas.
Exactly.
Okay.
But there's also an implied frame.
An implied frame? What's that?
It's created by like the composition of the colors.
Okay.
The style of the painting.
Okay.
And this invisible frame, it guides how we see the artwork.
Right. It gives us cues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the physical frame and the implied frame, they're never perfectly aligned.
Oh, okay.
There's always this gap.
This parallax.
Yeah, and that gap is actually part of the meaning.
Interesting. Okay, so our perspective isn't just how we look at reality, but it actually shapes what we consider real.
We're not just passive observers. Okay. We're active participants.
I like it. Okay, so up next we have this idea of Minimal difference.
Minimal difference.
What is that and why is it important?
So minimal difference is about how like small shifts in perspective can have huge effects on how we understand something.
Okay. Yeah.
So the source gives this great example from literature.
Okay.
It's F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Okay.
You know Fitzgerald.
Yeah. The Great Gatsby guy.
Yeah. He wrote this other book called Tender is the Night.
Tender is the Night. Okay.
And the book was originally structured so that the story starts like later in time.
Okay.
And it's told from the perspective of this young woman.
Okay.
Rosemary.
Rosemary.
And it focuses on like these glamorous couple.
Okay.
Dick and a cold diver.
Okay.
But later, Fitzgerald, he revised the book.
Okay.
And he made it start earlier.
Okay.
And he focused more on Dick and Nicole's backstory.
Oh, okay. So he like shifted the whole perspective of the story.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And it's not even clear that the later version is more true, like the flashback sections.
Yeah.
It's like maybe it's a retroactive fantasy.
Oh, wow.
Right? Shaped by what happens later.
Okay.
So it's like in economics, you know, this idea of primitive accumulation. Yeah, it's like the initial hoarding of wealth that kicks off capitalism.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just the story we tell ourselves.
After the fact.
After the fact.
To make sense of it.
Exactly. So the point is, there's no like straight line.
Yeah.
From past to present.
Right.
Our current perspective shapes how we see everything that came before.
Okay. Whoa. That is trippy. So it's not just about what we see now. It's also how we frame and narrate the past.
Totally. It's all connected.
Okay. All right. So next up, we have fantasy and desire.
Ooh, fantasy and desire.
Two of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
How do they connect to this idea of parallax?
Okay, so the source says our fantasies.
Yeah.
They're like this hidden structure.
Okay.
Almost like Kant's transcendental subject.
Okay.
They shape our desires. Like they teach us what to want and how to want it.
Okay.
It's like Descartes and the pineal gland.
The pineal gland.
Yeah, this like mysterious link.
Between the mind and body?
Exactly. So fantasy is like this mediator between our drives and the world. Okay.
And it messes with how we experience desire.
Interesting. So our desires are not just natural urges, they're shaped by our fantasies.
Yeah, we learn how to desire.
Okay, so then what about this idea of the act?
The act.
What is that?
So in this sense, an act isn't just something you do.
Okay.
It's like a moment that redefines what you think is possible.
For you.
For you.
Okay.
Like it changes the whole framework of how you understand your agency.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a fundamental shift.
It's a rupture.
Okay.
It breaks the rules.
Okay. And then what's the difference between lack and whole?
Lack and whole.
When we're talking about desire and capitalism.
Okay, so this is Jacques-Alain Miller, another thinker, right?
Yeah.
He says lack is like an empty space.
Okay.
In a container. Like you're missing something.
Okay.
But a whole is more fundamental.
Okay.
It's an absence.
An absence of like the container itself.
Yeah, like there's nothing there to even be missing.
Whoa. So capitalism, it's not just about filling needs.
Right.
It's about this constant circling around this hole.
This fundamental hole.
Yeah, that keeps us wanting more.
Always wanting more.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about constituted anxiety versus constituent anxiety?
Okay, so constituted anxiety is when the thing you're afraid of fits into your fantasy.
Okay.
Like it's part of your worldview.
Oh.
But constituent anxiety is when you confront the void.
The void outside of our fantasies.
Yeah, like the basic lack that the fantasy was trying to cover up.
Oh, that sounds terrifying.
It can be. It can be.
Okay, so moving on. How does the parallax view challenge these rigid categories?
Oh, yeah.
Like these binaries, these essentialisms.
So parallax by its nature challenges the idea that everything fits into neat little boxes.
Okay.
So they talk about Lacan's famous saying, La femme n'existe pas.
La femme n'existe pas.
It means woman doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
Not that individual women don't exist. But that woman as like this universal category doesn't hold up.
Okay.
It's about breaking down the male-female binary.
Okay, so it's not two opposite things.
It's more like a split within the one.
Within the one.
Yeah, like a mismatch.
A mismatch between the thing and...
And how we represent it. Like the number one and the concept of oneness.
Okay, so reality isn't about these fixed categories.
No, it's about the gaps. The differences.
Okay, the parallax.
Exactly.
Okay, and this challenges essentialism.
It does, especially with identity.
Okay.
So the source contrasts Hegel's view, where you identify with a fixed ethnic identity, with Deleuze's concept of universal singularity.
Universal singularity.
Yeah, which is more like Kant.
Okay.
It's about this fluid individual understanding.
Okay, so less about the group, more about the individual.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on to the unconscious and subjectivity.
Okay.
The source draws some distinctions between different thinkers. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, so first they contrast Freud with this philosophy called Laban's philosophy.
Laban's philosophy.
It's about like lived experience, vital ficus.
Okay.
So Freud's unconscious, it's not just a bunch of urges.
Right.
It has a structure, it's linked to language.
Okay.
And then they talk about Kierkegaard's distinction.
Kierkegaard.
Yeah, between a genius and an apostle.
Okay, a genius and an apostle.
Okay.
So a genius expresses something that's like more than himself.
Okay.
But an apostle serves the truth.
That's bigger than them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's Lacan's subject of the signifier.
The subject of the signifier. Okay, what is that?
So it's like this empty point.
Okay.
Where the self relates to the world through language.
Through language, okay.
It's the subject of the unconscious.
But it's not like a deep well of hidden desires.
No, it's more like Descartes' I think, therefore I am.
Okay.
Or Kant's self-consciousness.
So it's more of a structure than a thing.
Yeah, an empty structure.
An empty structure. Okay, so that kind of goes against how we normally think of ourselves as having like a solid identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it shows how much language shapes our sense of self.
Right. Okay, that's a good point.
Okay.
Okay, so then let's talk about the limits of what we can know and how we represent things.
Okay.
Another place where parallax shows up.
Right.
So they mentioned documentary filmmaking as an example. What's the connection there?
So they quote a documentary filmmaker who talks about how hard it is to really capture reality.
Yeah.
Like the closer you get to someone, the more they withdraw or perform.
Right. They become aware of the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
And they change.
Yeah. So there are always these boundaries.
That you can't cross.
Right.
You can't authentically record everything.
Exactly. You're always outside.
So even when we try to be objective and capture reality directly, there's always this inherent gap.
This distance.
This parallax.
Yeah.
Okay, so then they talk about the leap of faith we take in communication.
Right. So when we say something, we assume the other person understands.
Right.
But we can never really know for sure.
Right. It's an assumption.
Yeah. And they say this leap, it works because it's a kind of fiction.
A fiction.
Yeah, counterfactual fiction.
We act as if our meanings line up.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's this gap between the thing itself and how we try to represent it.
Yeah, language is always inadequate.
Okay, and the examples of the king and the money illustrate this further.
Right. So a king isn't a king because of some inherent quality.
Right.
It's because people treat him as a king.
Right, it's the social rule.
Exactly.
It's position.
Yeah, and money, a piece of gold isn't valuable in itself.
Right.
It's valuable because it functions as money in the system.
Okay, so it's the formal position, not the thing itself.
Exactly. The structure, not the substance.
Okay, so let's talk about politics and economics.
Ooh.
And this parallax we see between them.
So the source points out how we tend to focus on one and neglect the other.
Okay.
Like we either think politics is primary and economics is just about making stuff.
Okay.
Or we focus on economics and reduce politics to like a sideshow.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they give this example of Marx.
Marx?
Yeah, and his critique of the labor theory of value.
Okay.
So the standard idea is that workers are exploited because they're paid less than the value they create.
Right.
But Marx says, no.
Okay.
It's not about being underpaid for your work. It's that your labor power.
Your labor power.
Yeah, it has this unique ability to create new value.
Okay.
More value than it costs.
Right.
And that extra value.
Yeah.
That's what capitalists take.
So it's not just about the wage. It's about the whole process of production.
Exactly.
And how value is created.
Yeah, you can't just look at one side.
Right. You have to look at the whole system.
The whole system, yeah.
Okay. All right. So then what about ideology and belief?
Oh, ideology and belief.
How does the parallax view help us understand those?
Okay, so the source says, even when you try to deconstruct ideology, you can end up just describing the fantasy.
The fantasy that underlies it?
Yeah, the fantasy of capital, like what people actually believe.
Right, even if they don't know it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they talk about this idea of the big other.
The big other?
Yeah, it's like this system of shared beliefs and unspoken rules that kind of controls us.
Okay.
But then they bring up this paradox of the Muselman.
The Muselman.
Yeah, in the concentration camps. These people who are stripped of everything.
Their humanity.
Yeah, but somehow they represent like this pure excess.
Okay.
So it shows the limits of the big other.
Right, like it breaks down.
It breaks down.
In those extreme situations.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about Pascal's famous line, Kneel down and you will believe.
Ooh, kneel down and you will believe.
What does that tell us about belief?
So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay.
You kneel down and then you believe that you knelt because you already believed.
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's not that the action leads to the belief.
Yeah.
It's that the belief retroactively justifies the action. So the source says ideology often works like this. Cynically. Like people don't really believe.
But they act as if they do.
Yeah, or they project their belief onto this imaginary subject.
Okay, so it's this kind of game we play.
Yeah, a game of appearances.
Okay, and then they talk about irony as a form of critique.
Yeah, so in a world where everyone's like aware of the BS, irony can be powerful.
Okay.
It's about taking things more seriously.
Than the people who are saying them.
Exactly, exposing the gap.
Yeah. Between what's said and what's real.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the role of the thing.
The thing?
Das Ding.
What is this thing?
So Lacan says the sovereign good is das Ding.
Okay.
But it's not good in the normal sense.